Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Friday, April 14th, 2022, and this is episode 725 of Living Free in Tennessee. And I am noticing that my audio is all jacked up, so I am fixing that issue here. Sometimes when I get on my computer, it just tells me something weird. So if we did not have audio for a second there, I'm sorry. I've got like 3 audio outlets. I'm working on getting my own studio built, guys. And it's sort of one of those, I need the big picture plan, and then I'm going to look at the equipment I have and set up what I can from that makes sense, that isn't going to be too janky, and then start slowly sourcing upgrades in equipment as we move forward, so that my work computer, my studio computer, a Holler Studio, Janet, is not always the same thing. Because what happens is I rip this laptop out, I go and I meet with somebody with my laptop. Like I had a big old meeting with Chef Brett, about the food for the workshop. We're going to serve quail. That was like the big change. And I think he's roasting a whole pig now that he has. So I was just going to smoke some of the pigs that we raised here. And instead what happened is he's like, I got this pig I got to get rid of, that it's like, because he sold his restaurant and he was planning to do a pig roast there. And I was like, well, I think I can ask my buddy Brian to bring his giant smoker. And I asked him and he said he would. So we're going to do a pig smoking in the big roaster, big smoker, so people can see how that works too. Last time we did this, we actually processed the pig and then cooked it. This time it's already processed. So there's not a pig processing segment at LFTN 23. But when I took the computer out for that, it came back and all my settings were jacked up. And I've realized that to make this whole scenario here that we're doing, both with the homesteading, with Holler Roast Coffee, and with live streaming or doing videos for thing, if I want to take it to the next level, we need to take the studio to the next level. So plus I saw John Willis's studio. That's pretty darn cool to be able to just grab somebody and say, hey, let's talk. And I can't do that very easily. I end up with like right person and left person with my equipment right now. So, but I think I have all the pieces I would need to put people through a mixing board, go into one audio output and do it. Now, what in the world does all this have to do with homesteading, Nicole? Absolutely nothing. But it was kind of what was on my mind, because I started the live stream and the audio was all jacked up. That probably like buzzed your ears out. Anyway, today we're going to talk about what's coming up foraging wise on the homestead and in the holler. We're going to talk about livestock, including a lambing watch situation, an update on the baby ducks. Going to talk about what's happening, progress rise, growing, some holler neighbor things, and I've got a few things to say about homestead finances. At the end of that, I will have a 5-second pause, and we will start taking questions from the audience. So as we go, you folks on the live stream, if you have questions, put the first couple words or all of the words in caps. I'll star them, and then I, of course, will get back to those. And if you don't mind, make sure you like this episode and maybe put a comment in to get the algorithms moving so people know that we're live. Before we hop into all of that, though, I do want to do our featured event of the episode, because there are so many events coming up in our network that I was like getting into event schizophrenia. And so then I was like, I'll just choose one event every episode and start highlighting them. And this one I'm bringing up today, I've brought it up once this week already. I'm bringing it up today because the deal is this. They're doing a special price reduction starting tomorrow, April 15th at 2 p.m. Mountain, I believe. And it's going to make it's a BOGO deal. So buy one, get one free, which means if you want to go to the 2023 Permaculture Technology Jamboree in Missoula, Montana at Paul Wheaton's place, Wheaton Labs, and learn all about rocket mass heaters, regenerative building practices, raising food in a permaculture way. Like they do a bunch of hands-on all day long. It's like hands-on things, project demonstrations and builds and that sort of stuff. And then in the evening, they have sessions. I will be doing a session there on like, I don't know, this goes July 3rd through the 14th. I will be there July 3rd through 5th or something. And one of those evenings, I'm going to pop up and I'm going to talk about some homesteading perspectives that I've never shared on this podcast or anywhere. They will eventually flow in. And it's as I've developed the concept of smart homesteading, some really functional ways to do it. And I'm going to share a lot of lessons learned the hard way and how that happened. I'm also taking a different approach at this one because it's a situation where we can have a facilitated discussion. And I'm really good at facilitating. So I'm going to be pulling information from participants to try to help them get started on making their own plan, whether they live in an apartment, in a suburb, on a homestead, whatever it is. So this is the 2023 Permaculture Technology Jamboree. Tickets are $1,250. If you buy one ticket, you get the second free. That brings it down to half price. That starts tomorrow at 2 p.m. And if you want the link, I will actually paste the link into the comments here. Paul will know I referred you if you use my link. I mean, you can just go to wheaton-labs.com and find the event, of course, and get your BOGO. But this is a link straight to that page, and it does include some tracking information for him. I get a little bit of a commission. That's actually how I'm paying myself for this one. So if anybody buys tickets through my link, that helps me sort of offset the major travel expenses. Did you know how expensive it is to get from Tennessee to Montana? I had to like practice what I preach on this one and just suck it up and go. And so anyway, I'm excited to be there. I'm excited to check out Wheaton Labs. They've asked me to do a project demonstration during the day, and I'm thinking about it. I'm interested in doing one. Because I've never been there, don't know what to demonstrate. So if y'all are like, hey, you should do canning or whatever, cheese making, I can see if that's possible to do also as a demonstration while I'm there. I probably could do cheese making if I get my hands on some milk. And Justin from 30 Days Reviews is asking me if I'm driving. No, I'm going to fly to Spokane, Washington, rent a car, drive to Missoula, do the thing, drive back to Spokane, and then go home. As a result of this, on the evening of, I think it's July 6th, we are going to do an LFTN meetup in Spokane, Washington. If anybody's interested, Tori, who lives there, who's in our network, is helping me figure out like where we might meet for dinner. I don't know how many people are interested. You can email me if you are interested. I'll probably put a form out just to see. I don't know how many listeners I have in the Spokane area or convenient to Spokane, but if 4 or 5 of us want to get together, great. And Janet says she's going to be at that meetup too. So we've already got 2 people there. I just thought it'd be fun to meet whoever's, in the network who's in that area. And so I'm planning to stay in a hotel right by the airport because I have a weirdly early flight the next morning on the 7th to go see my father. And so that'll be fun too. But anyway, 2023 Permaculture Technology Jamboree, $1,250. Buy one, get one free. That brings your ticket down in half, which is pretty darn awesome. That's at wheaton-labs.com, or use the link in the show notes. Use the link in the comments for this video, and he'll know I sent you, which does not hurt my sponsorship relationship for the podcast. Also, speaking of sponsors, I want to thank today's show sponsor, and that is Strong Roots Resources. Strong Roots Resources joined us recently as a sponsor. And what Kerry does over at Strong Roots Resources is they build resilience from the ground up. His website is strongrootsresources.com, and he comes out and helps you assess whatever your property is. His specialty is, in fact, smaller properties, urban and suburban backyards, or a homestead the size of mine, which is about 3 acres. And he does an in-person visit, does the assessment, tours your property, helps assess your goals, and then generates a Google document that can be amended or updated for you to have a plan. He also has packages here that include support from him 4 months or a full year as you implement your permaculture plan at your house. He can also do individual builds, but I have enjoyed working with Kerry a lot. He's actually the reason that we might actually get our aquaponics system in this year, because with everything going on, I realized 2 of us were not enough people to get it done. And he's come out and just sort of been chipping away at the aquaponics build. I just ordered a whole bunch more parts. He does not know that I'm probably reaching out to him, but now he knows if he hears this podcast, because I think that we can do, we may be able to get it built at the spring workshop or during the spring workshop or right before it. And I wanted folks to just see the difference between the 2 aquaponics system, if we can show them that. I just ordered my pond liner today. So all I'm missing at this point is the layer between the pond liner and the pokey dirt that could pokey holes in the pokey thing. And we don't want holes in the pond for that. So that's really cool. Anyway, thanks to Strong Roots Resources for supporting this show. And with that, I am going to go into Homestead happenings. I just want to say good morning to a couple people joining us live. So good morning to Janet and Justin and Chuck. Welcome to the live stream. I know there are many more of you. Beth, welcome. Been enjoying John's interviews. Yep. And the funny thing about that, Beth, is I literally have a mixing board I use for events that I can use in a studio. And the only thing that's disruptive is when Self-Reliance Festival or the Living Free in Tennessee workshop happens, I pull that mixing board out. But I could run all the cables and have it set so it's just like boop, 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 out the door. And I have other cables for that. So I'm kind of excited about this. And the part for me that's hard on the thing. Oh, good morning, Strong Roots Resources. Thank you for your sponsorship. The part that's been sort of a brain fade for me is getting the video to work, because I have a lot of video cameras, none of which are talking to each other. I have a friend coming to the spring workshop to do video. So we're shooting video at the spring workshop in 2 weeks, and we probably will do a couple of the sessions live. I will have that as a package sale after the workshop. And she's going to look at the kitchen studio and just sort of help me figure out what and how to make it easy, because what's not easy is moving all the furniture in my living room and putting the lighting up and then building everything. That takes me a whole afternoon right now. And then once it's done, I have a whole afternoon of putting all that stuff away. And while that's, a small price to pay for getting decent video in the webinars I do, wouldn't it be cool if I paid just a little bit extra price now so that I don't have to do that? Anyway, obviously you guys see where my head is. It is not on the Homestead. But we're going to talk about that. So our first segment today is featured forage. This is where we talk about the edible things we're finding on the Homestead. And I do sort of vacillate between wild edibles or found edibles. This is the link to the spring workshop. Justin, thank you for being our link manager. And things that are growing in the Homestead. Now that we have a separate grow section, I am probably going to try to have more of the found items in this section and the garden items in that section. First thing is watercress is perfect right now. If it stays perfect between now and the spring workshop, we will integrate some of that into the salads we serve there. If it gets too peppery, we'll probably have it as a, hey, you can taste this, but it's, as it gets older and older and then eventually flowers, those flowers taste very radishy. Some people really don't like the flavor of radish, so I tend to be careful about that at the spring workshop. Try not to have like shocking flavors in the salad. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. I make a delicious watercress soup too, but we're not making it for the workshop because I'm going to take the squash that we grew last year and roast them and make a squash bisque from the butternut and tromboncino squash that we have stored. When I asked Tactile what besides grass was growing, because whenever I ask him about featured forage, he thinks about it from the perspective of his world, which is sheep. And the only thing he really cares about right now is the pasture. And he's like, well, the grass is growing, Nicole. And I'm like, I don't know how many weeks I can tell people that the grass is growing with a straight face and not have them be like, why is she talking about grass when she talks about featured forage? But the animals forage here too. We have ducks that forage. We will have chickens that forage. We have sheep that forage, and we have goats that forage. The rabbits are not currently foraged, but they're about to be foraging. So, it's not only what we eat, it's what they eat. So when I asked him what was coming up besides the grass, he said rocks. And I looked at him like, what do you mean rocks? He's like, well, as I'm mowing the grass that's coming up, rocks are appearing. And I was like, he just talked about the grass again. So that's one new way to talk about the grass is coming back. We do have a very good grass growing spring going on, and I'm happy about that. The sheep need to fatten up. So hopefully that'll help him fatten up. Hairy vetch has the worst name in the world. And why it's called hairy vetch is as it gets older, the mouthfeel has it has little teeny hairs on the leaves. But hairy vetch puts out a purple flower, and you cut off like the very tip, and you have that flower in your salad. It's beautiful, and it tastes a lot like a pea shoot. So it's one of my favorite early spring salad decorations. And my hillside garden that we put in last year wasn't very robust last year because it was kind of getting started. Like, it was really good at growing weeds. And then Carrie had to come help me get all those out a second time. And right now I'm getting the dead nettle out of it, and I'm seeing tufts of grass come up, and I'm trying to get them now so I don't end up with that same situation next year. But I noticed I had hairy vetch last week coming up in there, and we didn't plant that. It just came up. And my goal with the hillside garden is it's peaceful. It has flowers. It has edibles and herbs and things I can pick that I use near the house. And to me, having some hairy vetch near the house is nice. It's a beautiful vining plant. It'll go on well into June, so I can let it spill over the rock wall if I want to. And I can harvest those flowers for a salad. So I was kind of excited to see that. I saw my first bloom this week. Last week, I just saw the plant. This week, I saw my first flower. So hopefully at the GSD weekend, we'll have a salad. And in the salad, we can have some hairy vetch, and we can talk about that. So anyway, blackberries and raspberries are leafing out. We've talked about this before. It's the perfect time to harvest some of those leaves, not all of those leaves, for drying for spring tea. I don't have a drying station set up right now because of all the construction. So I might be missing the boat on this one. I've been missing the boat a lot, quote unquote, because of all the construction. And it's only that the situation of chaos in my home makes it hard for me to dedicate space for things. And I don't want to start projects that require dedicated space or do better with dedicated space without the space. And so I've actually been rapidly realizing I needed to upgrade my expectations for myself going into this gardening season because I didn't have a functional home. And that actually brings up the functional home. So a homestead works for you. You don't work for it. I'm currently working for my home. And it's because I'm making my home work for me better in the future. It's like homework futures. It's a homestead futures project this year. And that means that the things I do almost without thinking as a homesteader of over a decade aren't happening. And that stresses me out, man. But when I realized what the deal was, is I'm investing that time that is like almost without thinking time because it's become part of my my daily routine into non-routine things that are making the whole thing better long term. I became at peace with there are just some things I'm not going to do this year because I am improving everything. Good morning, one step closer. And one of those things is I may miss the boat on my early spring herb drying. Knowing this now is really cool because I can reach out to some friends who dry herbs in the early spring and see if they can dry extras for me. So after the spring workshop, hopefully we'll be together enough that I can start dedicating space to some of those things. Between now and the spring workshop, my entire life is focused around that spring workshop. And I'm fitting homesteading things in there. Like, we'll talk about some projects we're doing this weekend that have nothing to do with the spring workshop, although we'll be able to show them to you at the spring workshop. Tactical also let me know because I don't know, because this week I did not get to go wandering through my favorite foraging places. By the way, by not get to go, it's my fault. I did not go because I went and did other priorities. We have a bunch of new mullein plants. Now, last year we were taking mullein seed and scattering it around like seed fairies, and apparently some of those took. I love growing a lot of mullein for two reasons. One, it's a very helpful herb for me. I react to it well. The herbal tea, when I'm getting cold-like symptoms, really helps me with those. Two, you know how I have this issue with the early spring herb drying thing, right? Because right now I could be drying some mullein leaves. And it's nice to have 5 or 6 of those in the house in case you get a cold and don't want to walk outside and look for mullein. But in Tennessee, mullein stays all winter long as something you can harvest fresh and use in a tea. So what often happens for me when I get a cold in the winter is if I don't feel like I can make it, if I'm like that sick, I asked Tactical to go find some leaves, and I prefer to have the fresh leaves in my tea. If that's not possible, then I hit the dried leaves, and I usually cycle those through once a year so they haven't been sitting dry in a jar for too long. Anyway, so I'm super stoked to know there are mullein plants. The mullein plant will start with just the leaves this year, and then next year it puts up a big shoot and has flower petals, and you can then harvest those flowers for the same sorts of uses for teas and different things that mullein's good at. Good morning, Dawn. Our next segment is livestock. This is where we talk about the critters on the homestead. Everybody loves the livestock. I was thinking the other day that, people often think the hardest part of raising livestock is when you process them, like the day you process them, because you have a relationship with your animals and then you need to unalive them. And that's not the hardest day. The hardest day is when you raise livestock, and as a result of your own mistake, your livestock dies. Because they didn't have to die, right? You have guilt associated with that. And I've done things here that have resulted in animals dying, including the infamous chicken, like baby chicken slaughtering day when the neighbor's dog came over and killed all my chickens. And I could have stopped it if I had realized what was happening. This dog had never been aggressive towards chickens. And what was going on was he was really mad because he'd been evicted and he was out with his gun just unloading it into his targets to let off steam. Bam, 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 bam. Like it was a lot of shooting. And his dog was scared. And she came over here because she was scared. And, I petted her head and whatever. And you could tell she was scared. My dogs were cowering inside at that time. And I was on this, like, no compromise, I'm going to CrossFit thing on specific days of the week. And it was one of those days. And I had just moved the baby chicks out to the chicken tractor. And what I didn't realize at the time is they were small enough to get out in a couple of places, like where the axle went through the chicken tractor. So I didn't think anything of it. The dog had never killed chickens. And I remember there was the voice in the back of my head, guys. When there's a voice in the back of your head, you should listen to the voice in the back of your head. And the voice said, Nicole, you should tie this dog up with a bowl of water before you leave. Eventually the shooting will stop. And when you get back 2 hours from now, you can let the dog go and she can go back next door. But she's scared, and a scared dog might do things that a not scared dog wouldn't usually do. And I was like, nah, it'll be fine. So I leave. I came home and I only found I found 2 bodies and I found 3 still alive. There had been 40 chickens and she had scared them out of the tractor and they'd get out of the hole and then ate them, killed them, whatever. I found them all over, like the ones I found were all over the yard. I was declared the worst chicken mom in the county. I lost just under 40 birds, like 37 birds, and mostly didn't find their bodies. I have no idea. Like, did she eat that many? That must have given her some indigestion. But I think it's possible that they ran off and never came back. I don't know what happened. The ones I found were cold because they were still, doing the thing under the lamp. And that day was probably when I felt the worst about being a livestock person. And that's just something I was thinking about the other day, because I hear a lot of people saying this is the hardest day is when you process them. And I was like, no, because I know I'm giving them a rapid, efficient transition. And while that's hard, it's not as hard as that day. Yeah, Michael just said, dang, what a time to drop in. Michael, this happened years and years ago. It didn't happen recently. It's never happened again, because if there's ever a scared dog from next door at my house, I'm not leaving until that dog is contained. And we've got, like, all of our systems are better at keeping any predator out. So that's the worst chicken mom story. Homesteading is not always hairy vetch and and watercress and baby lambs. Speaking of baby lambs, so we have a ewe who we didn't know was pregnant on birth watch. And if you've been following my live streams, you've already heard me talk about this. We didn't think she could be pregnant. We are 6 months from the last time she could have gotten pregnant. And the gestation period is 5 months. And Dawn told me that sheep don't read books. So we're just watching her. But the truth of the matter is, this is my second time with a pregnant lamb going through the process of them giving birth. And her milk dropped. But last time this happened, it was 8 more weeks before we got the lamb. And the milk dropped. And then there was like the day it got really big. And then, there was a lamb. So we may be 8 weeks out. Now, the reason I didn't think that was possible is that we've had the girls separated from the boys since October. And as I understand things, usually a boy is required to get a girl pregnant on the farm, at least. And the math isn't working out. So she still hasn't given birth, but she really has looked like she's about to give birth. And we have the male sheep and the dogs separated from the girl sheep over next door to give her some space to give birth. And there's no baby yet. If there was a baby, Tactical would have already popped in here and said, there's a baby. And I might have been like, hey, that's the end of the live stream because I'm going to go look at this baby. Well, I realized something the other day. So the story I've been building in my head is that Floki got out one night and snuck over here and got her pregnant and snuck back, and we never knew anything happened, like a little teenager. And we all know that didn't happen. Because if livestock gets out, they got out. They don't get out and then sneak over and then get back in. And I'm 1/10 of a mile away from there. But I realized that we brought Brownie over here in December because he was causing problems over there, and we were hoping he would get Bruni pregnant. And so we put them together here, and she might be pregnant. We don't know. And during that process, which is something we did in December, I'll have to go back at the calendar and look at which date. It is possible on the day he came over, when all of the sheep were together for half an hour, that unbeknownst to me, he managed to get this one pregnant, and she's not due till May, June, which would actually fit with the timing of last time I had an udder appear, and it was 8 weeks before the udder got really big. So there's been some back and forth with Tactical and me about, like, when did we notice the udder? Was there a pre-udder udder? He still feels like she's due any time now. She might not, she might give birth anytime. She might give birth in May, or it might have been. So if she, at this point, I'm going with the Brownie theory at this point, because it's so far from the last time she was around anybody over there. It's got to be Brownie. And then that puts me mid-December. So January, February, March, April, May, unless she gives birth early. So we're going to have to figure out that out and what we want to do about it. And Tactical and I are still going back and forth about how pregnant she is. So we will see. And then I need to look at the calendar and see, was it November or December that Brownie came over here? Because I remember Brownie came over because I was like, listen, we got to get Bruni pregnant now so we can go into this whole new cycle where I manage when they get pregnant so that we're not on constant pregnant sheep watch. And I'm not sure we're going to do that now. We may just let them, whatever. It just depends. The whatever is easier, but also not easier. And I'm afraid we'll have more deaths. And then we have a relatively small flock because we can't have a huge flock. Yeah. So Mona says her pony used to sneak out and back in, found out when she left evidence outside. Yeah. Yep. I just don't think Floki did it. It would have been a long walk and a long walk back. In the rabbitry, we have a lot of babies. And yesterday I was showing people the babies. And I could only see 3 babies in the cage where there are 7. I was like, what in the world just happened? And then I looked and I realized the water bowl has become a cute, poofy rabbit bed. So there were 5 little baby bunnies in there. And it was pretty hilarious. But we are getting ready to deal with the rabbit situation. because we need to do something about the rabbit situation. I have 13 baby bunnies that need to grow out into adult bunnies, and they are in their cage with their mom. Some of them are about ready to wean. I need to look at the calendar for that. And then once they're weaned, they don't need to be around mom. So that and they're getting like, there are too many bunnies in the cages. So we either need to tractor them or something. But we do have 2 adult bunnies from the December ones that were born that are ready to be food. And so I talked to Tactical today, and I was like, if we process those bunnies, then we have that cage again and we can move bunnies. And the only thing is, I was thinking of keeping that female because I'd like to have another mom. And he's like, well, we can also choose a female from these batches. So I don't know what we're going to do. If we do process those 2 bunnies, they will be dog food because we're wanting to start moving dogs onto more of a raw-based diet. And I also have a number of processed rabbits in my freezer for us to eat that I need to get through. So I am in a hyper focus on eating the meat that we have raised because we haven't been eating it as fast as I thought we would. And which is weird, but I think my construction has a lot to do with that, because we've actually, like last night, my oven was supposed to be moved out from the wall and I wasn't going to be able to cook. So my plan was to get some takeout from the Chinese place in town, which I didn't do. I ended up getting it from the Mexican place next door at the marina because I hadn't planned food. And if I don't plan what we're eating at this time of day, because it's mostly in the freezer or in days in advance, so it's defrosting in the fridge, then I have to cook from frozen or make something up. And for me, like as a homesteader, having a bunch of ground meats around is super helpful for that, because you can do tacos, meatloaf, all sorts of stuff with ground meat very quickly. Korean beef is really delicious. But that was not my plan yesterday. And I was like, I'm sticking to the plan, even though we didn't move the oven out and sand the wall. Because we needed to sand the drywall, second coat, another sand, paint. And I want that all done before the spring workshop, so that when we're cooking at my oven, if splatters get on there, it's not like grease soaking into the paper of the drywall. All that is to say, we need to eat more meat here and eat at home more. So that is what it is. We're going to probably, I don't know if we'll process 1 or 2, but it's looking more like 2. And that feeds, 1 dog for a week almost. Baby chicks are doing great. We lost the one that I put in the ICU last week. And the reason we lost it is, so here's what happened. Emotionally exhausted by the end of the day, also physically exhausted. It's 11 o'clock at night. Like, Tactical pops into my house with this injured baby chick. And at that time, I was not like with it enough to think about what I really should have done long term. So we threw it in the incubator, threw another chick in the incubator with it, had the incubator on to keep it warm. And what had happened is, like, it had really injured the skin on its leg. It had pulled all the skin off. And I was like, we'll just see if it makes it all night and then go about what we're going to do from there. Well, in the morning, I realized its legs were deformed. And so what was going on is it was probably walking on its elbows in the meshy stuff that's the bottom of the brooder. And I could try to doctor this bird back, but here's what I know happens with a meat bird that you do that with. They never get to full size. They eat more than everybody else. And they don't have the most pleasant life. And, we do know where they're ending up. And so I decided, rather than do that, I would make the decision now to cull that one. So I culled that the next morning when I could think, but I had to go overnight, and like my brain had to reset for me to even be able to make that decision. So that was sort of an interesting thing. But at this point, the brooder we have is 3 feet by 3 feet, and the chicks have outgrown it, and it's time to move them. And the place we thought we were going to move them isn't ready. So we are doing a 911 urgent fix of the chicken tractor, getting them set up out there, and they'll be on grass now. With what we do is we hang heat lamps in there. And it's actually, like, right now is about when I usually transition them to grass anyway, as long as the weather's going to cooperate. Weather looks like it's going to cooperate. So we just have to make sure they can't get out through any of the gaps, that we're able to pull it, to move it. And then actually, like, the day you get the chicks from the brooder to the chicken tractor brooder is a beautiful day, because you're no longer cleaning up their poop out of a tray. You just move the tractor and the poop melts into the ground and grows plants, and then you're good to go. So that's happening. That means we need to move the tractor. Well, I think the tractor is where it needs to go. We do have some wood chips near it that are maybe in the way, but we'll be doing that. The bees have left the property. Ken came out and moved them to his farm, and that's good for me because I won't get stung by the bees. It's sad for my workshop participants because they won't see the bees swarm, which they do every year during the spring workshop. And so that means they're off my livestock list. When I first started this podcast, there was the whole story of how I became a beekeeper. And the story has ended with I became allergic to bees and they left the property. And now I have to think about wild bee habitat. I'm not worried about like the pollination here anymore because we've attracted so many of the beneficial bugs at this point. And when I first got those, I was having pollination problems. And there are other bees, like honeybees nearby that come around. But we have a lot more bee activity here now that there's more flowers and blooms and diversity on my property, which there's a lesson in there about do you bring bees in or do you bring pollinator-friendly things in that keep them on property? I am sad I won't be able to tell Nicole Sauce's bitchy bee barf stories anymore because I'm not around them. And then last week we had 2 duck babies. This week we have 0 duck babies. The Muscovies were setting eggs, and the first 2 ducks that came out were khaki Campbells. I could tell by looking at the ducks. And the Muscovy moms never got off the nest and started taking care of the ducklings. They just kept them warm and they were defensive of them, but they didn't give them food and water or anything. And I'm pretty sure what happened is when poultry is born, they have about 3 days worth of reserves built into their yolk, and they need to start getting water and food and that sort of thing. And that didn't happen, and they just died. And like, we didn't notice they were sick because the Muscovies were pretty guardy of them. And so I wasn't really poking around. I was hoping the other eggs would happen. So this week I have started collecting eggs to put in the incubator. We're going to incubate ducks. And I don't know if Tactical's brought them up yet this today. I don't think he has. So we're being like, I've started doing some video recording of how we're collecting the eggs, how we're treating the eggs to eventually put them in the incubator and incubate ducklings, because I do need to get more ducklings, and my choices are incubate the ducklings or buy ducklings. So we're going to incubate some ducklings. And I am going to do this video series on snort.social. Snort.social looks like this. I'm just going to show you on the screen for the people on the live stream. So snort.social is built on a decentralized protocol, and it looks a lot like Twitter. It works. So you can see there's Aaron from, was it Two Chicks Homestead? And a whole bunch of different people just posting whatever. It's an emerging piece of technology. It feels a lot like Float did when we went there. And you just go and you set up your account and start posting. And here's the deal. It's an emerging technology. It's built on a protocol called Noster. Think about that like when you send me a message over the internet and it comes to me, that's email. So Noster is email. And you can look at your email through different things. You can look at it through Gmail, through Yahoo, through Outlook, through whatever. It's glitchy. But I see a lot of benefit in playing with new technologies like these, especially when we know that the social networks that we're on and use all the time are unhealthy for us and abusive, right? And, you know, there's the Lots Project putting pictures of their dogs. The cool thing here is they have Lightning built in, which is a cryptocurrency transferring system for Bitcoin. And you can tip people or not tip people. So it's kind of like Fountain Podcasting 2.0 system. This is just another attempt at decentralizing and getting the man out of social media. And I'm super excited about it. And Noster stands for Notes Sent Via Relay, I believe is what that stands for. I'm going to do it there just because I'm hoping to attract some people from our network to go over there and give it a try. The one thing that is just really important is when you get there, sometimes it doesn't work. It's like when Twitter first came out, you go on Twitter and it would give you like the sad bird icon Oops, something went wrong. There's a lot of that happening. I'm using snort.social. There are other ways to access this same information. So because this is a protocol, you can use different apps to look at it, at the same information. I'm using snort.social because I'm on a computer and I want to find it. So 30-day review says, how does one find the group? I'm Nicole Sauce on snort.social, at Nicole Sauce. There is a hashtag being used called Grow Noster, hashtag Grow Noster, Nostr. And if you go there, you'll see a whole bunch of posts about homesteading and different things that people are working on. This is because the people first attracted to this were Bitcoiners, and it was all about Bitcoin for a while. So anyway, I'm going to be putting video up there of how I collect the eggs and sort of the journey through incubating the duck eggs, and then we'll see how it goes. I don't know how wonderful the incubating is going to go. I haven't incubated eggs in years, but I figured I might as well incubate some eggs and see how that goes. And if it goes well, then we'll have baby ducks. And if not, whatever. If the Muscovies start setting eggs again during my incubating process, my evil plan is hopefully we time it so that they accidentally adopt the ducklings that we have. So we'll see. If not, I'll be raising ducklings the hard way. Next segment is grow. This is where we talk about what's in the gardens. So the pollarding worked great. A couple years ago, Nick Ferguson hooked me up with some fodder trees and bushes, and I ended up putting a bunch in where I could. And the pollarding method is that you cut sort of up high the tree, so it's always putting out new shoots, and then you can harvest some of those new shoots for for feeding your livestock. And the varieties of trees that work well for this are, he's got a hybrid willow, he's got mulberry, and he's got hybrid poplar in there. The poplar is taken off like nuts. I looked around my homestead at other things that I know that sheep and goats like to eat, and the box elder is something that is like sheep crack. And so we pollarded all of those as well. And this year we're really getting a lot of good growth. It is the first year I'll be topping the hybrid poplar. So they're 2 years in. And they've got a lot of really healthy looking side shoots. And then I went out on a trek and found just the willow that grows in the area, and I pollarded some of that too. So our goal here is to reduce the need for external inputs for our rabbits, our sheep, everybody. We can make silage from that if we want to. I haven't experimented with silage yet. I might get to that this year. We'll see. It depends on how much extra I have, because if they're just eating it as it's produced, then that is what it is. I can dry it for the winter. There's lots of different things, but it's working out great. And we may do a set of pollarding at the workshop, just because it's about time for me to cut some of the trees back to get them putting that new growth out. Because when you pollard or coppice a tree, you get sort of, it's like resetting it for those shoots that come out to baby them, right? And that can make there are trees that have been pollarded for thousands of years that just keep coming back and producing, and they never die. So it's kind of an interesting thing when you get into that. I'm hardening off the plant starts. I did actually get them out yesterday, only because I left before 4 when I was going to take them out. Remembered I was supposed to take them out, called home and said, "Can somebody put those out, please?" Tactical put them out. And they looked good this morning. I left them out all night because it didn't get that cold last night. And I put them back in their cubby hole today. Peas, radishes, and the brassica family look great. Brassica is like broccoli and cabbage and cauliflower. They're looking great. I had some cardboard blow over the top of some of the brassicas, so they got covered up for a few days. They didn't like that too much, but they bounced back. And then I am looking for a beer. What does this have to do with grow, Nicole? I need a beer. And apparently somebody left a couple Budweisers in front of my house last weekend, and Tactical found them and poured them out because he's like, nobody's going to drink the Budweiser. I totally need a Bud. Instead, I'm probably going to tap into, I have this one really high-end IPA in my refrigerator in the back right corner that's been there since October. because I've got a problem. I put celery out in my aquaponics system. What I do is I get celery at the store. I take out the outer leaves. I kind of harvest what I want, and I leave that inner heart with the leaves that you have on celery. And then it'll keep growing celery all year long. And I had some pretty good celeries going until December when it got below 0. And then they told me to sod off. And here we are. I need to do a celery reset. So I put one out 3 days ago, and it's crawling with slugs. So I need to get some slugs drunk. When you get slugs drunk, they die. And it's got to be a great way to go, right? So I need to put some beer traps out, and knowing that they're on the celery, it means they're going to hit my lettuce next. So what I do is I take like a tuna fish can thing or a ramekin. I bury it in the soil on the beds that have soil so that slugs can just go straight in there and die. I don't know what I'm going to do for the ebb and flow bed. I'll probably just put it down in the rocks or something, but definitely time to get slugs drunk. And that method works pretty well for me, guys. So I don't know if it's the end all be all for slug problems, but I learned that one from my grandpa. And I've always just like, oh, there's slugs. It's time to find some beer. So if anybody in the holler has cheaper beer than that one really high-end IPA I have in the back of my fridge, just let me know, because I need to get some slugs drunk. I have a tomato start problem. I haven't started my tomatoes. I totally committed to Amy Dingman that I was going to start them yesterday, and I didn't because Chef Brett stopped by, and then by the end of the day I was tired. And we figured out all the food for the spring workshop. So I already had a menu, but we updated the menu a bit. And and it was worth the time because I was like, well, what are you cooking in advance? What am I cooking in advance? What sides do we want to do? We've got some good stuff in the making for that. So I still haven't started my tomatoes. Maybe today's the day. What I have done is reach out to a bunch of different people to see if they have tomato starts, because I need 20 plants ultimately. And I prefer a couple of varieties I like, but we'll see. Tracy Eversole says, of course we have cheap beer. Good. I need cheap beer. I just need one. I might need another one in 2 weeks. It's kind of funny how that works though. So that's another one of the things I'm just letting go because I don't have the space for it right now. Like the physical space in the house, is that I'm going to start like 6 or 7 tomatoes now that are some varieties I want to make sure I get another season's worth of seeds for. And I'm just going to source my plants from off Homestead, even though every other year for years, for over a decade, I've started my own tomatoes. Not this year. Next segment is Holler Neighbors and Community. I've just sourced a cheap beer in the holler because we have community. That's how it works. The Holler Roost is looking great. It's looking great. It's got a roof on it. It's got windows. The door is up. And some other little things are happening. And then it's done. I think Steve's hoping to have that done this weekend. Depends on the weather for him. But it looks fabulous. I was on a phone with a friend having a serious discussion when they put the roof on. So I didn't run down there when they did. But I watched the roof go up. And then I watched Holler Neighbors sit back and admiringly look at the roof, and the color coordination looks awesome. So really excited about that. That's all going to be on display at the spring workshop. This weekend we have a GSD weekend, get shit done. And I do this every year right before the spring workshop. It's all about clean up and set up for the spring workshop. Usually have a lot more people come. It's more like GSD Light, where mostly it's Holler Neighbors, and then Sean Mills is coming and somebody else is coming Sunday. So they're coming on different days. The scheduling just was weird this year and didn't work for people. So it's fine. We will get done. Like the cool thing this year is I don't have like, hey, so we have to build, frame, and deploy an entire outdoor shower. So people at spring workshops have an outdoor shower. This year, the outdoor shower is built. So it's really more like putting away all the construction stuff that's in front of my house, which Tactical has been working on all week. Hey, the dryer's inside my house now, so I can start putting my mudroom together. That actually frees up a whole bunch of stuff that's out there that needs to be inside. And doing things like the outdoor shower is not hooked up right now because I take it apart for the winter, but it can go back up now because it's not going to freeze. All sorts of stuff like that. The outdoor kitchen needs to go. And that sort of thing. So that's what's happening from the wider community. And then we had a great dinner for Easter where we just sort of pooled what we had. Tracy's mashed potatoes were delicious. I ate them for 3 days, so I'm totally off my keto at this point. But I didn't eat a lot over 3 days, but they are finally gone. It was like, wow, all the potatoes this week because we have leftover potatoes. Had a leg of lamb. The leg of lamb was really good. And I will be doing a video on how to make leg of lamb. There are different ways to make it, but I'll be doing one over at Homegrown Cooking, which is my new YouTube channel, which is about to actually freaking launch. I've been talking about it for 3 or 4 months now. And once the kitchen studio is in, we'll be on a schedule with that. So that's really fun. But it was really nice. Like, all of us work on projects a lot. So we got together. One of our friends came over, Trisha, who had to drive. She has to drive 35 minutes to get here. Holler neighbors were here. And she and we just hung out all afternoon talking. And it was one of those things, like when it was time for her to go because she needed to go home and take care of her animals, like we're talking on the way out the door and nobody wants to stop, right? And it was kind of funny because we haven't done one of those in a long time, but it reminded me that, like, we need to remember to stop and enjoy our homesteads and each other. But we get so focused on all the projects we have to do that we don't go places. And I'm thinking about, like, I was invited to go somewhere this Sunday and I'm like, I would love to go to that. And I already have a GSD weekend here. So it's like literally impossible for me to leave. So, more notice maybe, or I don't know, like right before the spring workshop's not the best time for me to leave anyway. But I need to circle back with that person because I was like, man, that would have been fun. But I'm going to be here getting ready for 60 of my closest friends to stop by in 2 weeks. It's less than 2 weeks now, guys. Yeah. Oh, by the way, if you don't know, we had a last minute cancellation for the spring workshop. And if you want to grab that ticket, it's available at livingfreeintennessee.com. Just go up to events and click on spring workshop. Or I think Justin actually already put that link in the comments. But it's available until I decide I don't want to deal it anymore. If we can transfer that ticket to somebody else, that's great. If not, that's great too. Like, it's fine. I just thought there were enough people who usually want to slide in at the last minute. And this person was coming from the West Coast and suddenly had some stuff come up where they couldn't. So yeah, it's livingfreeintennessee.com/spring-workshop-2023. If you want to grab the ticket, $150 deposit. And then 500, it's 500 total. So then you will pay the rest of that, which is $350 when you get here. And let's see, what else do we have to talk? What do you guys want to hear about? Infrastructure? Let's talk about infrastructure. I really want to buy a skid steer, and I saw one used in Smithville. It was very, very tempting. But what we're doing is the chicken tractor, not the skid steer. And then it's time to build. So we haven't really built a proper rabbitry. We've just had them in cages with, not something often, or I'm sorry, not something awesome for the poop management. So it gets a little wet and then it gets a little sloppy and then I have to put gloves on and deal with it and, put it in the ground. And Tactical's like, I really want to build a rabbitry. I really want to build a rabbitry. I really want to build a rabbitry. I don't have time to build a rabbitry. This is frustrating me. And I was like, okay, so, things are after the spring workshop. It's not like we're not busy, but on the homestead, but there's a lot less, like, we got to get ready for the build at the spring workshop. We got to get ready to feed all these people at the spring workshop. By the way, we have baby chicks because we have the chicken processing workshop coming up in June. And I said, well, let's brainstorm on the rabbitry. He's like, I've already got the design in my head, Nicole. I was like, well, here's what I noticed. When you and Steve collaborated on the Holler Roost design, both of you had some interesting ideas. And it probably made that even better than it was going to be. I bet that would happen with the rabbitry if you and Steve collaborate on the rabbitry. So hopefully they will have time to have a discussion about what Tactical's thinking. I actually want to see it too, because I'm particularly interested in automated water and poop management. And then, of course, keeping the rabbits safe and all of that. And ease of access, because right now when we have to get in there, it's an enormous pain in the butt when we need to get into the cages with them. And we need to make sure we can shelter them from like weird winter wind stuff as well. So I'll see what else Tactical has up his sleeve on that one. But those are the next infrastructure things after we deploy the solar build and the aquaponics system. Next up and last up, so Holler Neighbors, if you're going to jump on the stream after the 5-second pause, now is the time to start thinking about that. Finances. That's where we talk about the money side of homesteading. It's very easy to go into debt homesteading if you're not careful. And we're being a lot more purposeful right now about tracking where the expenditures go and getting our sales tax exemptions filed, because I don't have to pay sales tax on farm-related things. But you have to file paperwork to do that. You used to be able to just say it, but now you have to file paperwork. And so that's good. Like I've got 10 bags of, I found a soy-free feed that I like that does not have fishy stuff in it. Anyway, I'm picking up 10 bags of that today, and they only had one bag there last week. And then they ordered mine in, and I was like, oh, I need to get my tax exempt in, because for one bag it's not a big deal, but for like 10 bags it starts to become a lot of tax. Well, that helps keeps the expenses down on the homestead, which is super important. And then I'm also tracking receipts differently. I actually spent 6 hours on Wednesday going through paperwork here. I could do another 6 hours, but that like really got me much more up to speed on what's going on. And I've been putting off paperwork as I did all these events. And that's actually not necessarily a good idea, because it's hard for me to have the pulse on, am I losing money on Self-Reliance Festival or not? Am I losing money on, whatever? It's important to know that. It's also important to know if you're losing money on the sheep or the chickens or any of those things. So I got a different system deployed, because as we've added livestock, it's kind of important not only to know is the farm overall losing money, and it's important to know which business unit or which livestock / whatever, if I was making sauerkraut unit, which ones of those are losing money, so you can make better decisions about what to keep doing or not keep doing or what to change. So that's just something I'm bringing up, because as you go into your homestead, it becomes easy to become overwhelmed and end up with a paperwork mess. It's the next place I need to concentrate. And when that happens, that's when you start making really bad decisions, because you don't have the data you should have to make the good decisions. And I'm a person who hates clerical work, so I have to make myself do it. And when I restructured my week 2 weeks ago, I restructured my week so that after this live stream, I'm off for 2 days. Well, the rest of today and tomorrow, and I can focus on the homestead for those. It actually freed up more time during the week for me to do the 6-hour session. It was kind of interesting. It was like I was both busier. Like I was so tired last night by the end of the day. It was absurd, which happened the week before too. But that also has freed up more space in my mind, emotions, and life to do the clerical things I don't want to do right now. So that's been good for me. The LF23 workshop meat all came from here. So it's all meat we've raised, which does help, because I don't have to be sourcing at retail prices for regeneratively raised meat locally, all of this stuff. So that's super helpful to our finances. The 2 meats I am buying from off farm, not counting the cow that is bought from off, and we don't raise cattle, is that we decided, we had one meal where we're having, I think it's the Salisbury steak with the gravy thickened with mushroom powder, which I told Brett, I was like, hey, order more mushroom powder if you could for that. He said, oh no, I make it by freeze drying mushrooms and grinding them up. So now I know what I need to do in my spare time, because it was so good. So we're having those, and I try to make every meal have a non-red meat / non-pork option, because we have some people who, for religious reasons, do not want pork who come to these. And we have some people who are allergic to all red meat or all mammalian meat. Yeah, Janet's like, yum, yep, that's going to be so good. So that night I did not have a poultry or a fish, right? And the night before we had chicken, which I'm going to start pre-cooking this weekend. And I was like, well, we could do chicken again, but that's kind of boring for anybody who's not able to eat red meat. And we almost always have 1 or 2 people who have alpha-gal, which is the tick-borne illness that makes them allergic to red meat. So it's like the allergies I have built in to the workshop, where you have to know what not to eat, but as long as you know what not to eat, you don't get nailed, is nuts. So I don't have any nuts anywhere at the workshop. Mom's like, let's put nuts out for snacks. I'm like, nope. There might be in some of the breakfast bars nuts. I don't know. But we don't have bowls of nuts out, which I used to do because the nut allergy and slash the unknown nut allergy that we have are anaphylactic and strong. And we don't want to accidentally do that. The second thing is dairy, because we have enough dairy problems that if I just do one dairy free side, we're fine. And like the mac and cheese has cheese in it, or you can have tacos and not put cheese on your tacos, stuff like that. And then we always have gluten allergies. And so while we don't serve a lot of bread at the workshop, but some people do eat bread, and we do have rolls and some other stuff. Those are not gluten free. But if you know not to eat rolls because you're allergic to wheat, don't get the wheat tortillas. We have corn tortillas, like stuff like that. So those are the three things that are built in. And then the other thing that's built in is the red meat allergy. And that's just because I think when people live outside more, they're more likely to get exposed to the alpha-gal situation. And then we have a red meat allergy, and we don't want to kill anybody on accident. So that's the story there for the workshop food. The last thing is I am in talks about restructuring how food works here. And I've always just sort of bought stuff directly, and some of it I buy and some of it the company buys, and then the company serves what the company buys for, LFTN or whatever. And then we also sell food to members, right? And I realized what I need to do is change how I think about the food that comes off the homestead. Because it's just like, oh, I'll just grab a dozen eggs. Well, then is the duck feed a write-off or not? So now we're buying food from the homestead for personal use. I was doing it the other way, where I was just paying for stuff and then using it with the business. And what makes more sense is the business takes on the expenses, and then we buy what food we use here. And then if the stuff that's produced from the homestead is used for events or whatever, those expenses all work. From a tracking standpoint, that's like 7,000 times easier, and it makes more sense. But it's taken me years to get to that point. But at this point, like last year, it was like this half cow is for LFTN, so LFTN bought it, and that half cow is for whoever's just eating here. And they were two different cows stored in two different places, so it was fine. Or two different half cows stored in two different places. But I was like, wait, this could be so much simpler. And then the homestead is its own thing, and the food I eat is different, So anyway, that's just something I wanted to bring up as how we're changing how we track stuff. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did and you want to support the work I'm doing here, you can support the show in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. Two, consider becoming a member. Head on over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. All right, guys, welcome to the Q&A session where we just have a conversation with y'all. And the way you get involved in this conversation is you use the comments in the live stream. Tactical is on mute, and as usual, we have a view up his nose. You can't tell because he's decided that he's angelic and he wants to have a halo, so he's just keeping the sun right behind his head. Anyway, Tactical, I'm going to ask you, how's it going today, and what are you focused on? But you have to unmute yourself to talk to me, so.
It's going pretty well. I've been bouncing back and forth between, I've got to go down towards the workshop, so carry a couple of things down there, grab what I need down there, and then walk back up. And then, still picking at the yard stuff. This is, a couple of days ago was the first time I've actually mowed. I was just kind of letting whatever came up come up and grow as much as possible. just to kind of try to get all the bare dirt gone and let, like grass put on seed heads and whatnot. So now it's time to play catch up on actually, mowing the grass and figuring out with all of the recent excavation work where I can and can't run the mower. That was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I remember the first time I mowed here, I high centered 3 times and you had to come with your 4-wheeler and pull me off. I got stuck. Remember that?
Yep.
I was like, hey, come get me. And he came get me. Thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate it. Asterisk. He had to come get me. And it would be like, he'd pull me off, and then it wouldn't be like 10 minutes later, I'd be like, again. And the third time he was like, again? But I only ever high centered that one day. And then I figured it out. I'd never mowed here before, and I had lived here for 13 years. I'd never been on a riding mower anyway. And I'd never been on a riding mower. So it was like a lot of firsts for me at that time. And I had to learn how the riding mower just operated with the topography of the place. So that was kind of funny. So you're doing that all over again. So guys, the whole point of getting the sheep is we don't have to mow. How's that going for your Tactical?
Right now, not so hot, at least over here. I do have a plan to start rotating the goats through, but that requires a couple of things that I don't have right now and a little bit more time. Like, the goats are a little more prone to
getting out! Get out! Oh, I'm sorry, what? They're more prone to what?
Not respecting the fence. So it's...
or you can call it not respecting the fence. I call it getting out!
That was the polite way of putting it.
I don't know what. Tactical's being polite. All right. Sorry, guys. I got really loud, and apparently it got really loud for you. The cool thing is when I do the audio for the podcast for this, it compresses all of that, so it's less loud. Sorry. What were you going to say, Tactical?
I don't know.
I do this to him all the time. Tactical likes to think about one thing at a time and talk about one thing at a time most of the time. I go into full-on scatter freaking mode, and I go off on a million tangents, and I dream. So I'm like, this would be fun to do, and that would be fun to do. And he's like, I can't keep up. Maybe he can. So I think I annoy the crap out of him all the time when I go off on the tangents. Do I?
I usually just try to ignore you.
Well, then I'll be like, we talked about that. He'll be like, we did? Okay, we're going to start taking questions from you all, guys. Put the first couple words in all caps if you can. And I'm going to start with 30-day reviews. Justin asks, are you still renting campsites, and how filled is this summer so far if you are? I have had my hip camp turned off for 2 years as we have been doing all of the earthworks, because whenever we bring heavy equipment in, it turns it into a very beautiful mud bog. And I don't think anybody wants to camp in a mud bog. That's been one reason. The other reason is my outdoor shower is right by my house. And people, before, when people would come camp here, they would get really oogly about the fact that, if the curtain shifts, I could be peeping at them from the window in my bedroom if I was just in the right place, and it made them oogly, and they weren't sure they should give me a good review. And I'm like, well, first of all, I have no desire to see your naked butt, but you don't know that about me, and maybe I'm a weirdo. And secondly, if the curtain shifts, you just, the person's like, this curtain's not right, and I was like, boop, and then it was right. And there's 2 curtains. There's a whole bunch of safeguards if you're very shy about that. Well, okay, so my outdoor shower now, if you go up the hill above it, you can look down in it and probably see a boob. In fact, there's the open window factor of it that I need to close. Literally, there's a boob window. Because when I take a shower there, I tell everybody in the holler, hey, I'm taking it. Well, I don't tell the Eversoles, but I'm like, hey, Tactical and Nighthawk, I'm taking a shower for the next 5 minutes. Don't walk that way. And they don't. And I would notice if they did. So it is definitely from a hip camp standpoint, not ideal. That said, Dustin, if you are coming through and want to camp here, you should reach out to me and we will talk about it. I can say that there isn't an outdoor shower. I have not been ready to have people on the property at all with all of the, we have completely moved mountains in the last 2 years. And that has just been not conducive for campers. So that's where we're at with the hip camp situation. What I want to do is get one of those like propane showers and a rainwater system set up out where the camping is, and they can take showers out there. And if they run out of water, they run out of water, or we can refill it with a hose or whatever. But that's sort of where I'm planning to go, is to have a second outdoor shower that's not right in front of my house. This one works great for the spring workshop. And yes, the boob window will be closed, but it's not super great for random strangers on my property. There is a difference between who stops by on hip camp and who comes to one of my workshops. Most people who come to my workshops listen to the podcast, and we're just in a different place. K-Monk says, on skid steer, please have it checked out by a certified technician from that manufacturer. A buddy of mine is killing himself trying to get it straight, used to auction buy. Yeah, if I buy something like a skid steer, it's going to take a lot of thought, because I have a history of buying equipment for the Homestead that does it turn into a maintenance nightmare, tactical mechanic?
Yes.
Wow, he was polite again. He's in a polite mood today. So, yeah, I had a tractor for like 8 years that didn't work. It worked, 30 seconds at a time, and then something else would break. So that's why I've been really hesitant to get a tractor or any other gas-based sort of heavy lifting equipment that isn't brand new. And then even brand new stuff, hearing from friends, breaks. And until we have a plan for how we maintain it, store it, and assess it for functionality, I'm not really keen on it. But I do see the value of having a skid steer here and a forks attachment for my coffee, because we have to move really heavy things of coffee around, and that's not super fun. And I know if I had a skid steer here, like all the rednecks in the holler would go nuts with that thing. So, watching John Willis use a skid steer around his place with different attachments has really opened my eyes to how useful it could be here. But my goal is not to buy the cheapest skid steer at the auction either, because that has just bit me in the butt way too far, So that's where we're at with the skid steer. I will definitely, like, if it's used, it's going to be gone over very carefully. Claiming Liberty says, do you want cinnamon rolls for the workshop? Of course we do. I just told Chef Brett, here's what happens at the spring workshop. So some cool stuff has happened. We're adding quail to go with the Salisbury steak, and I ordered those. We have, of course, seafood coming in. We have shrimp and salmon this time. I don't think we have the mahi. So, and then paired with that is going to be venison roasts. And what we're going to do is, I was like, what happens is people who are coming to the event say, hey, I have X. Can I serve X? So Nighthawk's going to do a pierogi, how to make pierogi demonstration. Totally not keto, guys. And he's making a bunch of pierogi in advance. I don't know if he's going to start those this weekend or how that's going to work. But Trisha left a bunch of really nice locally sourced organic flour here, and he's going to use that. She just left it for me. I needed a 1/4 cup of flour to thicken gravy with. She just left the whole thing. And I was like, well, that'll make pierogi dough. It'll be perfect. Then Carrie from Strong Roots Resources reached out and said he had turkey eggs. So those are, I was like, yes, we want turkey eggs. So depending on how many turkey eggs we get, I don't know what we're doing with them, but something will be done with them. And I talked to Chef about that. And then I said, what's probably going to happen is Sarah's going to say, hey, do you want cinnamon rolls? And the answer, Sarah, is we always want cinnamon rolls. Even those of us who are not eating gluten or wheat or dairy want cinnamon rolls. And we're going to totally torture our wheat knees having at least half a cinnamon roll during the workshop. And that's the thing about the spring workshop for me, is I'm pretty good about staying mostly on plan. And when I go off plan, it's whole foods and not refined sugars, unless it's the chocolate. Oh, by the way, I want a chocolate bar today, Tactical. It's not that. But at the spring workshop or Jack's workshop or different times throughout the year that I choose, I will go off plan and eat something like half a cinnamon roll, which totally has both wheat and refined sugar in it. And the frosting she makes, the illegal frosting, is delicious. It's delicious. It has dairy in it, though. I can eat dairy, but it's the reason it's illegal, I think, is it has cream cheese in it. So anyway, or it has butter. I don't know how she makes it. She makes it. So yes, please, we can talk about how many make sense for the workshop. You're looking at 65 people this year going to be there, and some number of them won't eat any at all. And Nighthawk is allergic to dairy. That's all we got. So actually, if it's butter in that frosting, though, I don't think he's allergic to butter for some reason. So I don't know. So anyway, that's all the questions I have right now, Tactical. Nobody's putting questions in. They're just talking to each other in the comments. So we are going to wrap up if there are not any additional questions. Before we do that, I will let Tactical talk about whatever he wants to talk about right now. So go for it, Tactical.
Time to get back to work.
That's it. Yeah, I'm putting the mudroom back together, but I'm driving to get the chicken feed next. Oh, it has cream cheese. It has cream cheese and butter. So yeah, so I'm heading the rest of the day. I'm gonna do. I think Tactical and I need to figure out how to get that chicken tractor like secured. I'm gonna buy a tarp for it because it needs a tarp. And I am going to, oh, thank you for the super chat. Oh, yeah, I said asterisk thank for the super chat when that happened. He just wanted to make sure I thanked you. What's the most we've had at the workshop? We had 85 people. That was too many people. I reduced the ticket count this year, so it's 65 people. And it'll be 64 if somebody doesn't want that other ticket. But it was... I think we can do 85 people or 80 people again if we want to, but not this year, not with all the ripping up I did of all the things. So we just decided a little bit smaller head count this time and make sure we can deliver high quality food and a high quality experience to everybody. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining the Friday live discussion. Before we sign off, I will be highlighting this event tomorrow, but I do want to point out anybody who's in the Midwest, like Kansas, convenient to Kansas, think about going to the Midwest Preparedness Project. If you're not coming to my workshop, go there. It's the Midwest Preparedness Project Festival, Spring Festival. It's the 26th through the weekend, basically. So it's really cool. It's put on by Tag. I think Tag's involved from Life Done Free, and we have Spags. And we have from Spags Unfiltered, and we have Data from Going Deep with Data. They put on this really cool festival. I don't get to go to this one because it's during my spring workshop. I'm going to be at the one in the fall, but definitely if you have not gotten out and been with people, go check that out. And I will throw a link to that in the show notes. And also don't forget, Paul Wheaton has his buy one, get one sale going for the Permaculture Technology Jamboree over in Missoula, Montana. I will see you guys soon. Talk to you later.